Good morning, good morning, good morning. How's everyone doing? Yes, and let's go ahead and give this day a big hand. We're grateful for this day, and we're thankful for this great gathering. And my name is Bishop Byron L. Smith Sr. I am the senior pastor here at Gethsemane Christian Love Missionary Baptist Church, and we want to welcome you to our first teach-in here at Gethsemane as we open up and talk about the seriousness of knowing your rights around housing and immigration. And we're grateful for all of the members and the officers and leaders here at the church. And we're also grateful for Community Coalition. Let's give Community Coalition a big hand. We are grateful and thankful not only for the leadership at Community Coalition, but we are also grateful for our friend and our leader of our city, Mayor Karen Bass, who is the founder of Community Coalition. Let's give her a hand as well. And we want to just encourage you to know that we have a program here that we're going to follow a little bit behind time, but that's okay. We're going to make up for the time. And then following that, we're going to also not only hear from some great presenters from Community Coalition, but we also are going to hear from civil rights attorney Chris Martin. And let's give him a hand. He is the founder of Rebuild All of LA. I think it's necessary for us to not only come together and talk about knowing our rights, but I also think it's important for us to stand and understand our legal rights. As we know that Los Angeles is dealing with a plethora of disturbances, and we want to make sure as a community that we stand up for all. And so we want to make sure that everyone is informed, everyone is comfortable, and I want the city of Los Angeles, as well as our friends and partners in this community, to know that Gethsemane Christian Love Missionary Baptist Church is a friendly space, not just for those who are striving to draw closer to God, but those who are wanting to stand up morally for what's right for all of the community. And so we don't discriminate here at Gethsemane. We're here for everyone. It doesn't matter your color, it doesn't matter your nationality, your sexual orientation. We believe that all people deserve justice and all people deserve fairness. So we want you to feel comfortable and continue to share with those in the community that Gethsemane Christian Love Missionary Baptist Church is a friendly space. Can you all shout a friendly space? Yeah, for everyone. Yeah, come on, you can do better than that. A friendly space. That's a little bit better. Let's do it one more time like you really mean it. A friendly space for everyone. Come on, put your hands together now if you really believe that this is a friendly space for everyone. And I want to also thank another co-laborer and a friend, Dusky, from Raising Cane's, all the way from the Valley. Let's give her a hand, and we thank God for the work that she's doing up north in the Valley and also here in LA. And so it's all of the partners here that's helping us make a difference in our city. And so before we get started, I want us to just open it up for us understanding how the latest events throughout our city has caused a lot of trauma to individuals, especially around ICE and what they're doing and inflicting trauma upon our community, our families, especially those who are dealing with immigration status. And so, but I want you to know that it's bigger than that too, because not only are those who are in the immigration status is being traumatized, but those who are watching these things happen is being traumatized too. So you don't have to directly be impacted physically by something that's causing trauma, but I want you to know that even if you see things and hear things, it causes trauma too. And for those who are on the front line, those who are operating as frontline responders, I want you to know there's such a thing called vicarious trauma. That means when you work long enough with those who have been traumatized, you become traumatized too. And so I'm saying all that to say that we all are being traumatized. It doesn't matter your race, it doesn't matter your nationality, it doesn't matter your religion, your religious stance. We all are being traumatized by what's happening to this city. And I'm here to let you know that as pastor and the bishop of Gethsemane Christian Love Missionary Baptist Church, we're willing to stand arm to arm, heart to heart, mind to mind, foot to foot, hand to hand with those who are going to stand up for what's right. And so with that being said, I want to just kind of open it up for a little safe space, because I know that all of the things that have been happening, this latest incident at MacArthur's Park has caused a major trauma with people in the park, with their families, people in the schools, people who are just going to the grocery store are being traumatized by all of these events, and even the places of worship. And so we want you to know that we are taking precaution, just so you would know that if you want to make comments and you don't want your face to be seen, we want you to know you can stay seated where you are, and the only individuals that's going to be televised through our social media outlets will be those who are coming to the podium. So if you feel inspired to want to make a comment and not have your face be seen, we want you to know that this is a safe space, and we respect that, and you don't have to have your face to be seen, but we definitely want your voice to be heard. Everyone's okay with that? All right. So with that being said, I want to I'm not going to go into a major presentation, but I want you to know that from a clinical standpoint, because I am a clinical clinician as well, and I'm inspired to do more of psychoeducation training, because I realize that many individuals in our community, not only are we stuck with the stigma of mental illness, but we sometimes don't know the terminology. Sometimes we don't know that help is around us. And I want to make sure, and I'm passionate about educating the community. I could sit behind the desk and I could just receive clients and go home for the day, but that's not satisfying to my heart. But my heart is for people to understand when people are really there to help you, and what that looks like and what it sounds like, so that you'll know the difference. But what I want to do today, just for a brief moment, and then we're going to bring in Olympia from Community Coalition, and we're going to get right into knowing your rights. But before then, I just want to open up and just check in with you all about how you're feeling about what's going on in our city, and how is it affecting you personally, mentally, emotionally, or even physically, because trauma affects all aspects of who we are. So I want to just open it up, and if we have some extra mics, yes, and so if you just raise your hand, we'll make sure that you get a mic to you. If you don't mind just checking in, just sharing how you're feeling, emotionally, mentally, and how have all of the things that's been transpired around what's been labeled as the big beautiful bill. We know it's not so beautiful because it's cutting into our safety net of our community. They're cutting the SNAP program, which means the food. There's going to be a major food shortage in our community. The SNAP program is being cut. Social Security is being cut. A lot of things that has helped our community. Even the food banks, the funding federally from that was supporting our food banks are being cut. So what that's going to do, it's going to really affect our community in a major way. And some of you may say, well, why is Bishop Smith so inspired to want to do that? Because I recognize that if we don't make our community better, our faith of worship can't be better, because our faith of worship is made up of our community, right? So I want you to know that we're going to be also working with clergy, getting them to see that we must go beyond the four walls of the sanctuary into the community, because the church is, or the place of worship, whatever faith you have, is coming from the community. So we want to make sure that our clergy and our ordained ministers are aware of the importance of social justice and civic engagement, because if we don't have a better community, then we can't have a better place of worship. It goes hand in hand. And so I just want to open it up to anyone if you feel compelled to want to talk about how you are feeling right now, emotionally or mentally, over all the things that has been transpiring in our community thus far. And you will not be put on screen unless you want to. Let's turn that on.
Dusky Wanamaker. I live in North Hollywood, and I've been an activist since I was 18, protesting the Vietnam War in Isla Vista. So I have seen a lot, been through a lot. Yes, I'm 75, I'm proud to say so, but now trying to activate with my new knee, look out, high heels, but trying to now activate the senior community around Social Security and what was happening with that bill. And this started back in March with Raising Cane's, and now we've seen how many of the young people are now getting involved and know that this is going to affect them someday. But then so we're focused on that, but then all of a sudden the bill passed. Much as hard as we fought, that stupid bill passed. And I was already up and down, you know, with everything else going on, because there's so much. But almost every time I open my mouth to talk about it, I'm in tears, because my gut, my stomach is churning every single day, 24/7, because you don't know what direction to go first. Where do we focus now? And I'm sure many of you are feeling that too. Who's going to do what? Can I help? Can I, you know, everybody now has a part to play the next 3 years in saving Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, education, immigration rights, housing rights. No matter how small, everyone, there's something every person can do. And as Vincent Harris, I'm not sure where he got it from, he always said, no one can do everything, everyone can do something, so find your something. And I'm just begging for people just to take another look deep down and say, what's really hurting me the most? I'm going to cry in a minute anyway. What's hurting me the most, and can I do something in that area? Because we need everyone right now. And my parents were born and raised in Ukraine and grew up in Hitler's Germany, Joseph Stalin's Russia, and Hitler's Germany, because I'm German. Yeah. And if they were here today, they would keep repeating what they raised us with about what fascism really truly is, and that's where we're heading. And that's just how critical it is, and I'm sorry it takes so long.
That's all right. You don't have to be sorry. Let's give Dusky a big hand. Yeah, it's affecting all of us. Thank you for having the courage, Dusky, and the work that you're doing, and we're thankful for your parents for laying the groundwork. Let's give Dusky another hand.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? All right. My name is Chris Martin, and all right.
Hey, man, he's a civil rights attorney. Let's give Chris a big hand. Come on, you can do better than that.
What's going on, everybody? My name is Chris Martin, and you know what I see is an opportunity to show empathy for our neighbors. That just because it's not necessarily us who are going through it, that doesn't mean that we can't speak up for somebody else who's going through it, because eventually they will come to your door.
That's right.
They will knock on your door. After they come for your brother or your sister, they will come for you.
That's right.
So it is incumbent upon us to stand up for one another, because that is the way that we will collectively break the chains. And I noticed that you said Isla Vista. I went to UC Santa Barbara, and you know, that's where I got my start as a community organizer. So I see you, you know. So yeah, it's important that we stand up for one another, you know. And that's what I want to say. I can recall when Donald Trump first got elected, and I had been so used to just, you know, thinking about the struggle for my own people, right, for black folk, right? I can recall that when Donald Trump got elected, that was the first time, one of the first times that I had said to myself, dang, I feel a little bit more sorry for somebody else than I do for my own people right now in this exact moment, you know? And I had empathy for the Latino community. I want you to know that I see you and I love you, and together we will get through this. Thank you.
Let's give him a hand. He's going to come back and help us articulate some legal things that we can do and shouldn't do as it relates to the law. So we thank you, attorney. Let's give attorney Chris a big hand. Amen. Chris Martin. Yes.
My name is Dr. Gerald Higginbotham, the Prime Minister and Governor of the American Slave Nation. I represent the 21 million descendants of slaves here in the United States. I was born in this community. I was part of the first Watts riot. It'll be 60 years here on August 11th. And so I got the wake-up call then. And the night Dr. King was assassinated, that was my late 10-year-old birthday present. So I've been laser focused here for the last 57 years. And I put something together that I want to say here. It's important. The rights of immigrants and the responsibility of the rightful heirs. Peace and honor to each of you. I'm here today not only to speak about rights, but about the roles and responsibility in this land called America. While immigrants often come seeking opportunities, we are a people who never asked to come. We were the opportunity. The labor, land, and life of the descendants of American slaves were the original capital investment of this nation. So today, as you learn your rights under U.S. law, I ask you also consider the rights of those whose culture and contribution are foundational, yet still unrecognized. The Constitution, even in this most oppressive form, acknowledged the American slave, but it never granted that same acknowledgement to our humanity. That's why we are now organized lawfully, peacefully, and spiritually as the American slave nation. We don't come to compete with immigrants. We come to complete the unfinished justice story of this nation. So the call to action. So to my immigrants, brothers and sisters, we welcome your pursuit of freedom, but ask you to recognize our pursuit as well. Let us not ignore the foundational wounds in this nation while we seek new futures, as you seek new future. It's not just about knowing your rights, it's about knowing the root, because only when the root is healed can all the branches grow in justice. And my final statement. I'm here today on behalf of the American slave nation birthright children. The federal government has declared war on birthrights, but we were born right, by blood, by legacy, and by law. As the Prime Minister of the American slave nation, I step forward to protect the constitutional and spiritual rights of the American slave descendants, especially our babies, whose birthrights, identity is being erased before our eyes. The 14th Amendment was written because of us. Our babies are the reason it exists. And now, we stand to say, you will not erase what God and history has already declared. This is not just political, it's prophetic. This is not just about rights, it is about restoration. We are the rightful heirs. We will not be silent, we will not be erased, and we will be recognized. Thank you.
Let's give Dr. Hickenbottom a big hand. We're thankful for your presence on today. Is there any others who want to just kind of express how they're feeling emotionally and mentally? And then we're going to jump into the presentation, and then we're going to go into knowing your rights. Is there one? You want to come up? Or you want to stay there? Either way. All right, let's give him a hand as he comes. We're just checking in right now. We're checking in.
I think there are a lot of thoughts that go through my head. One of them is that right now things are changing. It's a pivotal moment, and communities need to come together to push for more change. Things that are happening right now it's just like a lot of confusion from all sides, and it's just like, how does the community come together to really decide the future, not just of this community, but all these communities in this country? And that's very important. And that's what comes to mind. Sitting here right now, I'm like, I see members in the community, church members in the area of LA coming together to try to take that to try to make a difference going forward. Yeah, and that's what comes to mind. Actually, my friend Chris, he's the one who told me about this event, so I was like, I'm gonna come over here, and because I'm trying to visit more and more places and to kind of explore, how do we make this change? How to make these things happen? So it's just like, that's what I'm thinking. I'm excited to come here and see people do things, participate, help any way I can. So yeah, that's what comes to mind. I guess keyword service, just figuring out how can I be of service.
Wonderful. Let's give that a hand. Grateful. Right. Now we've heard from several young men, and we've heard from one young lady. Is there one young lady that would like to share? Come on forth. Amen. We're going to keep it brief, and we're going to move right into the presentation on understanding grief and loss, because we definitely have seen a lot of loss here in Los Angeles.
Thank you. I used to work in the corporate world. I'm sorry. Giving our praises to God, to my bishop, Bishop Smith, Lady Jill Smith in her absence, and all my brothers and sisters in Christ. Please forgive me. I was in the corporate world, and I worked in the Huntington Park area, the Southgate area, and I didn't realize that there was a lot of discrimination in the Latino area. I had a co-worker, she was Latino, and she was coming against those that like her. And I asked her why, and she said because they came from Mexico. And I was like, I don't understand. And so she broke it down to me. She said, for those that were born here in America, you know, we're here legally, but those that had come from Mexico, they're illegal, and they were called wetbacks. And she was giving all kind of names, and I was so saddened because she wouldn't wait on them. Me and my co-worker, who are African American, we would wait on them, but she would not wait on them because of the difference. And I was like, wow. So it's, you know, I thought it was my culture did the same thing, but it was in the Latino area, and I was like, I could not believe it. But now we're coming today to see what's going on, and I had read an article about the Latinos that was born here. They have a highest rate of what's going on against their brothers and sisters, and it saddens me. It really saddens me that there's a big division of those that are born here, want those to be deported back to their country. You know, and I wish our administration will take into consideration for those that have been here for years. And I didn't realize it was so much red tape that they have to go through to become legal here in America. And if you can hear their stories of what they've been going through, and the, you know, just being stopped, and there's so many different things that they had to jump through hoops to become legal here. And it saddens me that they didn't take consideration for those that have been here for a long time, who are taxpayers, for them to make them legal. And for those that's coming across the border, then you deport them. But those that have been here for years, I'm saddened. I really am saddened. And tell the truth, I really felt that those that was here illegal, I felt that they should be deported. But then when I did a lot of research and I had to think back what I went through with my coworker in the corporate world, now I understand. So I wish this place was packed, but there's a lot of people that are scared. A lot of people are scared. They're scared to go to school. They're scared to go to the stores. They're scared to come to the churches. They're scared to go everywhere. There's places I go, it's almost like a ghost town. And it's really sad. And then to see what's happening going on in Santa Barbara and Camarillo, they doing tear gas and rubber bullets at those people. It's unbelievable, you know. But we are here, and we are here to stand with our brothers and sisters because we all are one.
Thank you. Let's give her a hand. Wonderful, 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 wonderful. And so when we talk about, oh, yes. Come on up. Miss Rutledge. Let's give her a hand. She's a Community Coalition friend. Yeah, thank you.
I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy that these kind of meetings are going on. I am very saddened that so many people have been asleep for so long, and it takes something like this to wake people up, just a little,
That's right.
because they're not fully awake. Divide and conquer has always worked, always. And people are still being divided. People are still othering others without recognizing the fact that God is one God, one creator. And we are all brothers and sisters. And Jesus Christ came to give us the example of being there for each other. And they're not seeing it. Divide and conquer and money and God, and Jesus Christ said, leave everything and follow me. But this administration is feeding on the fact that othering is still there. So please let this time and age of a people feeding off hatred constantly, that's all they feed off, and they're looking at others as they're not their brothers and sisters. So please, you know, follow your heart. Follow your heart and always look at everybody, no matter with their economics, no matter their color, no matter their size, no matter anything. We're all one family. So stand up for each other, because when Hitler was in power, we're here now once again. We have history to follow. So do better.
Let everyone say do better. Yes, we have to do better, and we have to not allow for fear to paralyze us or stop us from making progress. But we need to continue to see how we can bridge the gap, especially with the trouble that we're experiencing, not only within our community, but also within the faith circles. And I want people to understand that faith should not separate us, but it should unite us. And humanity should not separate us, but unite us. Issues should not separate us, but unite us. And so when we talk about the effects of what has been happening within Los Angeles, I just want to briefly talk about, for about maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and talk about understanding grief and loss and navigating trauma cycle. Because when we think about grief and loss, Los Angeles has definitely received a lot of loss, not just in losing individuals to death, but also the loss of rights, the loss of freedom, the loss of just having a peace of mind. And so when we talk about grief and loss, it doesn't necessarily just talk about death. It doesn't negate death, but grief and loss goes with just a change of lifestyle, a change of being able to move around. Those who are afraid to come out of the home, they're dealing with some grief and loss. They can't move like they used to move. They can't go to the stores like they used to go to the stores. And they can't function like they used to, so they're dealing with some grief and loss because of the trauma. And so today I recognize as a clergyman that A lot of the faith circles, a lot of the people that come into the faith circles, they're dealing with trauma. And so many clergymen and women try to spiritualize trauma. But one of the things I'm hoping that we can educate our community about is that we have to learn where to implement spirituality and when to deal with mental dysregulation. And so when we talk about psychological trauma, and I also want to talk about vicarious trauma, because vicarious trauma, as I mentioned earlier, is the eternal transformation that occurs when professionals, caregivers like ourselves and helpers are continually exposed to others' traumatic stories or suffering. Over time, these exposures can reshape their sense of meaning, safety, trust, and identity. It is the cost of caring too deeply for too long without enough support or being replenished. And this is where we as a community, we must come together and learn how to replenish ourselves. And so I want you to think about ways that you can replenish yourself, especially during these troubled times and these difficult moments, because replenishing ourselves is important. We constantly give out, we're constantly helping, we're constantly trying to help lift up other people, and sometimes we forget to learn how to lift up ourselves. So I want you to think about that. And then trauma itself. When we talk about trauma, the psychological trauma is the emotional, cognitive, and sometimes psychological impact that cause experiences or series of events that are overwhelming, threatening, or terrifying, often leaving the individual feeling powerless, unsafe, disconnected. Trauma isn't just about what happened. It is also about how the person experienced what happened and whether they had a healthy support system to recover. So when we think about what's going on in our community, especially around ICE, we're being traumatized on all fronts. And so I want you to think about how trauma is affecting you and how can you replenish yourself in a healthy way. And I want to just encourage those who kind of shied away from faith circles, faith communities, especially churches and mosques, whatever your preference is. I'm not here to tell you how to replenish yourself, but I just want you to know that if you don't come close enough to really understand how faith communities are really replenishing stations where we come in and get replenished. It's not about pointing the finger. It's not about casting people out. It's not about marginalized people. We get enough of that in our community. So faith communities is really about people coming in weekly, learning how to replenish themselves. And I want you to know that dealing with people who have been traumatized from the community, coming into the church, sometimes they spew their trauma on you. And you have to know how to replenish yourself. If not, the trauma is going to affect you in a negative way. So I want you to think about this. Think about all of the replenishing stations that we have. Community Coalition is a replenishing station. Gethsemane Christian Love is a replenishing station. You can go for a hike is a replenishing station. There's so many ways that we can replenish ourselves. And I want you to know that one replenishing station may not fix it for you, but it doesn't mean it's not going to help someone else. So don't discourage someone from being able to get into those areas and those safe spaces to be able to replenish themselves, because you just don't know how important it is for your neighbor to be replenished, because one day you may need to count on your neighbor to help replenish you. So when we talk about that, I want you to think about this, because when we talk about introductions to grief and loss and strategies of grief, I want you to think about this. Think about coping strategies for grief. We got to learn how to cope. And yes, I'm a man of faith, and I believe that God is a healer. I believe that God is a way maker. But guess what? I also recognize in reality that God operates on God's own time. Just because I pray doesn't mean God is going to answer it right away. Just because I kept on praying doesn't mean he's going to answer me tomorrow. I don't know when God is going to answer. But in the meantime of me praying and trusting that God is going to answer me, I need to be able to have some stages of being able to help and some coping skills and some coping strategies to help me until God makes a difference. That makes sense? Yeah, and even if you don't have faith circles, you don't understand and believe in the concept of God, just know the value system is still the same. You don't have to have the concept of God, but you still need to be replenished, right? And so in the psychology field, we talk about having unconditional positive regard. That means you're accepting people just as they are. In the faith circles, We call that unconditional love. It's the same thing, just the terminology is different. And so I want you to think about how we allow for certain things to separate us when if we get the proper education, it lifts the veil of ignorance and we see we have more in common than we do different. And this is how we break through racism, sexism, and all the isms that's causing all this trauma in our community. So I want you to think about that as we move along. And then when we talk about the importance of addressing grief, so many times, especially in the black and brown community, we sweep things under the rugs. We say, well, it happened yesterday. It's no big deal. But it still is a big deal because you didn't deal with it. And sometimes you think, well, if I go and go on a vacation, that's going to fix it. But when you come back, you're still dealing with the same stuff. Some of you say, well, if I just have a drink of wine or if I have a little smoke here and there, I'm going to be good. Well, guess what? When you get done being high off the wine and high off the blunts, guess what? You still got to deal with it, right? It's not going to go anywhere. So when we talk about the importance of addressing grief, we have to have safe spaces. We have to have these replenishing stations where we can come and really address these issues. And this is what I love about the faith community, is that it becomes a safe space when people trust each other. If you don't trust one another, it's difficult for letting the faith community and the faith circles do what it's supposed to do. But we got to learn to trust each other because the world is teaching us not to trust each other and to look at all of our differences. But when we talk about societal stigmas around grief, society often places stigmas on grieving process, leading individuals to feel isolated or pressured to move on quickly rather than allowing for themselves to heal. And I want you to know that grief and loss, and we all are going through grief and loss, all of us. Things have shifted in our community. Things are shifting as we speak, and we're going to have some grief and loss issues. And I want you to be able to know that it's okay, and everyone will move through the process differently. That means just because you got over it 2 weeks, don't mean that the next person is going to get over in 2 weeks. And just because someone is dealing with it for 6 and 7 months doesn't mean that you're any better than they are. It's a grief process. There's no set time span for it, but we have to create these healing and replenishing circles so that people can get what they need to be replenished. And then I want to talk about the role and the support systems. When we talk about all of the agencies, the nonprofits, and the various faith communities, and all of the nonprofit organizations and individual circles like Raising Cane's are creating this role of support, a support system, and that's what we need. We need support systems that we can tie into and connect with and lock arms, especially in these times. And when we talk about the roles of support systems, I want you to think about the organizations that you belong to, whether it's a faith or non-faith community, where you're in civic engagement. All of these are support groups that we have to bind together as a community right here in Los Angeles to override all of the stuff that's going on. And support systems including friends, family, and professional counseling are crucial in helping individuals navigate their grief, providing emotional comfort and safe space. Someone say safe space. Yeah, we all need safe spaces. I don't care who you are. I don't care how strong you are. I don't care how many degrees you have. I don't care if you don't have any degrees. We all need support systems that's going to create a safe space for us to express our feelings. And this is why we open it up with giving you an opportunity to express how you're feeling, because it's important. Now, when we talk about defining grief and loss, I kind of went into it a little bit earlier, but I want to just go ahead and be more specific. The types of grief can arise from various types of loss, including death, divorce, jobs loss, or health challenges. Some of us, we've gone through some health challenges. We can't move like we used to move. We can't operate like we used to operate. That means you're going to be going through some grief and loss. You ever heard someone says, man, I wish I can do what I used to do 10 years ago. They're going through a grief and loss process, right? It doesn't always mean death, but grief and loss can come through these various circles, and grief and loss doesn't mean you have to reach a certain age. Young people can go through grief and loss, right? They're not isolating just because. They're not being defiant just because, but because they're going through some mental dysregulation that's causing them some grief and loss. So when we talk about the impact of loss on individuals, loss can deeply, someone say deeply, affect individuals, leading to feelings of sadness. We talked about, and we heard some people talk about they felt sad. Deeply confusion, feelings of sadness, confusion, sense of emptiness, and it can also impact mental health, relationships, and daily functions. And when we talk about relationships, and we talk about the importance of relationships. This is why we can't afford to allow what's happening under this current administration stop us from developing healthy relationships with one another. It's okay to think different. It's okay to be different. It's okay to operate different. But the key is, how can we come together when confusion and a sense of emptiness is taken over and we need a place to move? And then we talk about this grief and loss can also mimic what we call in psychology PTSD. Symptoms such as emotional numbness, anxiety. Anyone deal with anxiety? Just raise your hand. Don't be embarrassed. Yeah, look around. Look around. There's a lot of people dealing with anxiety right now. Intrusive thoughts, or even withdrawal, isolation. This is all a part of the grief and loss process. So I want you to think about this. So the next time you see people numb to this, say, oh, it's not that they don't care. They're just dealing with some grief and loss, and so they have shut things down, which can become very dangerous if that happens over a period of time. And so when we talk about grief and loss cycle, I want to talk about the grief and life cycle, because it's multiple things that happens. And it's happening in our community right now. So when we talk about dealing with city officials, we talk about dealing with the police, we're talking about dealing with ICE, we're talking about dealing with the average senior citizen, we're talking about dealing with youth who is afraid to go to school, afraid to let go because their parents might get deported. All of this stuff is pushing us into a grief and loss cycle. Some of those attributes in the grief and loss cycle is denial. Sometimes say, oh, I'm not bothered by it. Oh, it's okay. Everything is well. That's part of the cycle. Or sometimes you say, man, I'm angry. I'm angry what ICE is doing. I'm angry what's happening to our community. I'm angry what's happening to our nationality. I'm angry what's happening all around me. And then we get to the point where we'll say, hey, I'm going to bargain. Maybe if I do a little bit of this, maybe they'll stop. Maybe if I don't do this, maybe they'll leave us alone. All of this is part of bargaining. Then you say, man, I've tried everything. I've tried everything. I tried to be nice. I tried to stand up for myself. And now I'm feeling a little bit sad. And sadness of one day goes into 2 days, goes into 3 days. Now it's a week. You've been sad. Now 2 weeks is going by. You're still sad. Now third week is coming around. You don't want to get out of bed. You don't want to eat. You don't want to engage. You're not answering text messages. You're no longer answering calls to people that you normally would enjoy. Now you don't even want to go do things that you enjoy doing. Now this is what we call depression. Someone say depression. And then you get to the point and say, hey, I've done what I can do. I've got connected with healthy support systems. I'm accepting, man, some of the things we're just not going to be able to change. Then the next day you get back, you're angry again. And then your friends say, well, I thought you was okay. I thought everything was well. Now you're angry all over again. Then you start crying, and then you start bargaining. Then you start accepting. Then you say, what's wrong? You act like you got bipolar. You're good some days you're not good. Some days you're great, some days you're sad again. You tell me you're all right, then I call you in 2 hours, you're crying again. This is all a part of the grief cycle process, grief and loss. When you see people moving around, and there's no set rhythm to this. 1 minute you can be depressed. 1 minute you can say, I'm going to accept it. I'm going to move on. Then you get to the point of saying, man, I'm angry. I'm angry again. And I thought I was over being angry. And then you get to the point you say, well, forget about it. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to move on. You start denying it again. And then you go weeks into denial and say, hey, I'm good. I'm accepting it all. Then you say, man, I'm still sad. Just know you're not crazy. Just know that you're not off your rocker. You're just going through the grief and loss cycle, right? And one of the things I want us to think about is sometimes we get stuck in that. There's a lot of people you're going to see be stuck in the grief and loss cycle. And one of the things that I do, I have done as a clinician, is I deal with the teardrop model. And the teardrop model is a powerful tool that I use to help people to push through that. And I don't force them, but I just kind of use it as a tool to help them to see a brighter day and a way out. But then there's a dual process. A dual process because there's alternative models to grief, and I talked about one earlier, the teardrop model. But the dual process model and the task-based model, I won't get into that too deeply, but I want you to think about there's always a way out when you're dealing with mental health dysregulation, and you don't have to suffer in silence. This is why these support groups, this is why these gatherings in our communities, this is why accepting people when they come into the faith community, accepting them just as they are. You don't have to judge them. Just accept them. And you continue to build these safe spaces, and then they'll allow for you to come in and deal with what's really bothering them. That makes sense? So think about it. You don't have to have it all together. None of us got it all together. right? So don't go into a faith community thinking I can't go there because I still got these issues, I still got these problems. We all got problems. The only difference between those who are tied into a faith community and those who stay outside, those who come in recognize, I can't make it no other way, right? And the people on the outside think, I don't need that. But guess what? It's just a support system that can help you to navigate, right? You don't have to have it all together. Some people say, oh, they just want money. No, it takes money to run church. But guess what? You and your mental wellness and a healthy spirituality is much more important than any money you can bring into the church. Because if you are good mentally and emotionally, then you're going to give your best. You're going to give your all to making a difference in the community. And I tell people here at Gethsemane, our role is not to come and stay inside the walls. We're coming to get replenished to go back out to do the work. That make sense? Yeah, we come in to get replenished. That's why we come to Sunday school, Bible study. We come to worship service to get replenished so that we can go back out. Many of you see me in different circles because that's our role, right? And so we have to make sure that we understand that these alternative models of grief is crucial. The dual model process and the task-based model. I won't go into that too much, but I just want to kind of cruise through this, and then I'm going to have the teaching come in. But then these are some healthy coping skills I wanted to get to that we got to adjust, is the individual coping mechanisms around mindfulness and meditation. That's what I love about praying. And whether you a Roman Catholic, you like the rosary beads, however your meditation is, you got a prayer circle in your house, whatever you need to do. Sometimes you just got to go in your bedroom and close the door and just be by yourself and just think about the goodness of the things that you have and not always focus on what we don't have, because that can draw you into depression. Mindfulness and then creative expression. This is where you let people be who they are. Let them have the hairdo that they want to have. Let them dress like they want to dress. This creative expression is crucial. And this is where we got to make sure that the faith community don't get in a box with this. We got to let people come in just as they are. Let them be creative, but understand the framework of where we're trying to go. That makes sense? All right. And then there's community support approaches. There's several of them up here, and I just want you to write those down or take photos. There's several ways, as I mentioned earlier, that we can build these support systems where I can run to the valley, be with Raising Cane. I can run to San Pedro. I can run to Pasadena. I can run to Compton. There's no boundary line for me. That's why I love it from not being here. I don't have no boundary lines. I can go to East LA. I don't have no boundary lines, right? Because I know that when I'm in a particular community, there's certain rules that you must go by to show respect. And when you learn to respect people, you'll build some friends. That makes sense? Yeah, I can go anywhere. I can go to Westwood. They might look at me a little funny for a while, right? I can go into Compton. They want to know who am I, right? I can go to Long Beach, say, what city you from, right? I can be in South Central, and they look you in the eye, want to know if you're going to be real with them. Am I right? But when you respect the context that you're in, even if you're uncomfortable with it, you got to learn how to respect it. And I'll show you somebody who's going to make friends. So when we talk about community support approaches, these are several approaches that I have, and I'm just going to skim through them, and I'm going to sit back and get out of the way. But group therapy and support is one of them, right? I love group therapy, and I'm grateful for Brother Herbert, who's also a mental health clinician. We work together in Orange County, right? And the way they do things in Orange County is a little bit different than they do them in South Central. Amen? But we learn how to make sure that we can switch and change and shift still to get the best out of people, and that's crucial. Rituals and memorials is crucial. And we can't go on and mask the symptoms. This is what we're guilty of as a faith community and a community. We have learned professionally how to mask what we're going through. And I'm hoping that we will learn to be comfortable with each other where we don't have to mask what we're going through. And then trauma risk leads to addiction. We are dealing with major addiction and mental health issues. And addiction is just a cover-up of some mental dysregulation. You tell me your drug of choice, and I can pretty much pinpoint what your mental illness situation is going on, right? And so I want you to think about that. But unresolved grief operates similarly. When mourning is interrupted or prolonged without support, it can lead to complicated grief, depression, risky behaviors, including drug and alcohol misuse. And I'm going to stop there because I want you to see that if we don't come together as a community and we look and really be that replenishing station for one another, we're going to keep falling into complicated grief. We're going to keep dealing with depression. We're going to keep seeing and hearing about risky behaviors, including drug and alcohol addiction and many other addiction, gambling addiction, you name it, eating addiction. All of those addictions, once you go underneath and deeper with those, the symptoms are the same. We get focused on what drug do you use? What drug did he use? What addiction do you have? If you go deeper, the symptoms are the same. Same way in our community. When you go beyond race, when you go beyond sexuality, we all are human. And I'm going to conclude with that when you get past the differences of who we are, our skin color, what city we come from, we are all human. And one thing that I've learned as a clergyman over the years, no matter how rich you are, no matter how poor you are, no matter how many degrees you have, no matter how many degrees you don't have, no matter what kind of car you drive or what city you're from, we all will die. We all will die. And our task is, what kind of legacy will you leave behind for the next generation? We only have a window that we call life. And I want to challenge you. What are you going to leave behind for the next generation? Every funeral that I have conducted, people who are rich, they leave money, their family fights over that stuff, divide the family up. Those that are poor, they go on social media and try to do fundraisers to bury their loved ones. Those that are highly educated that die, someone else will come into their office and get their books and pass it on to someone else. But the key thing is, when you touch people's lives to be the best that they can be, to be their authentic self, you're leaving behind a legacy. And I'm hoping that all of this stuff that we're going through in Los Angeles right now and all over the world with this current administration, we will rise up and leave a legacy for the next generation. Thank you so much. All right. We're going to set up for, we're going to have interpretation happening, right? No? All right. No? All right. Okay.
Nobody needed it.
No one needed it? All right. All right. And that's okay. Maybe can you interpret while she's speaking for those that are listening online? Because some people may have been afraid to come out. Is that okay? Yeah. That all right? Because what I don't want people to feel excluded by what we're doing. I want them to feel included. And so we don't want to speak in an unknown tongue without interpretation. That makes sense? Well, let's give Olympia a hand from Community Coalition.
Hi. Hello. Hi. So while we set up, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. Just share a little bit about me. Oh, okay. Oh yes,
right here.
I can be loud.
Give it a little more volume. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Olympia Blanco Zuniga. I am the Senior Civic Engagement Manager at Community Coalition. Very excited to be with everyone here today. Thank you for Pastor Bishop Smith for helping us make this connection. So today what we'll be covering is we'll be doing 2 different Know Your Rights presentations. We'll explain a little bit about what Know Your Rights presentations are, and then an opportunity for folks who have loved ones who maybe are not able to attend today, or folks on our live. So a little bit about me. I was born in Tepic, Nayarit, Mexico. I came to the United States when I was 11 months old, and I was undocumented for 20 years. I was undocumented throughout my time in my undergrad at UC Santa Cruz, where I built a lot of friendships with loved ones. And I was also part of a family that fought in an eviction during the pandemic because we were asked to leave by our landlord after living in the home for over 20 years. So in addition to coming and sharing this with everyone here, I'm not an attorney, but I'm hoping that we can build some of that collective knowledge, and just wanted to reassure that I'm not someone from the outside in, but someone who has grown up in the South Los Angeles, Southeast LA area, who has experienced these things firsthand. And I know with all certainty that we are resilient because we're still here, we're thriving. And I was able to do what I did, get through school, know my rights because of the folks who came before me to fight and to set up the systems and to share the information that I'm sharing now. Yeah, so thank you all for having me. So I can, okay.
What we can do is, if you want, is this being recorded?
Yeah, this is online.
Is it? Okay. So what we can do is you can continue doing your presentation, and then you can send it to me, and then we can translate it.
So for
You're so
the,
passionate, like I don't want to interrupt you.
so for the folks on our live, to make this more accessible, our translator will be downloading the recording of the session, and then our translators will be interpreting a dubbed version, a voiceover, and then sending that out for people so that you can see it in Spanish. Yeah, to make it a little bit more effective. So starting with, what is a Know Your Rights presentation? So as I mentioned before, I myself am not an attorney, but Know Your Rights presentations were developed to help people know their legal rights in situations, to be able to advocate for and defend themselves. So this includes encounters with police. It includes after a natural disaster, knowing the rights of what support you're entitled to, who is responsible for providing that, with encounters with immigration, workers' rights, when you experience something like wage theft, knowing how you can collect that money from working and who to go to. So that's an overview of what a Know Your Rights presentation is, and it's meant to be something that can be communicated easily and shared with one another, because the more people know their rights, the less likely we are to have our rights violated or know how to respond accordingly. So housing. The two Know Your Rights that Coco, oops, my slides are mixed up. No, it's okay. But the two Know Your Rights that Coco offers is, next slide. We have one on immigration. So what we cover in the Know Your Rights presentation about immigration is on documents. So what are important documents to have copies of, to have on file, for your family to have access to. Planning, so how to plan for an encounter, but also how to plan for your family if someone in your household is abducted. How do you find them? How do you make sure that your children are being taken care of? How do you ensure that they won't go into child protected services or into the custody of the state, but instead into the custody of a family member? And then finally, your constitutional rights, which is what we're seeing large violations of right now, unlawful searches, seizures, things like that. So we cover the basic constitutional rights for all people living in the United States, regardless of legal status. And then next. For housing, we go over tenants' rights. So what are your rights as a tenant in California? Broadly, the eviction process. So what is an eviction? What is the timeline for eviction, and what are your rights to fight for an eviction? And then finally, more specifically in the timeline, by when do you need to access legal services or legal recourse? And how long does it actually take to evict someone, right? Because we do have abusive landlords who say, well, I am evicting you, you have a 3-day notice, and in 3 days you have to get out of your home. So knowing, is that lawful? What does the law say, and how long does it actually take to go through the process? So, for those folks, I know that we may be limited on time, or you may have loved ones who can't attend. This QR code is Coco is making an effort to host these Know Your Right presentations in community. So one example is today, hosting it here in a community space. We do them in our offices, but we're also inviting people to register to have a Know Your Rights presentation with their friends or their family members in their backyard, at a cafe near them, in their living room. We'll come to you, especially right now, as was mentioned earlier, people are afraid to come outside. There may also be mobility issues. Many tenants who have landlords that are not doing their part to make their homes accessible have shared that they can't leave their home because their landlord hasn't installed a wheelchair ramp. Things like that. So we want to make sure that we're as accessible as possible, and also letting community know that if you can't come to us, we can come to you. So if you're interested, you can scan this QR code. Maybe you want to see a little bit about how I present first, and that's totally fine. We also have a resource table where people can access Know Your Rights flyers. We'll also be doing referrals with some of our partners, but I'll get a little bit into that as I start presenting. Forgive my 50 million PowerPoints. So we'll start with the Know Your Rights workshop. One thing that I want to preface when we talk about your rights is that things are changing consistently. That's why we put the date on these presentations, because every day something new is announced and there may be changes, and we try to keep the presentations as updated as possible. But just knowing that things could shift in the near future, and I'll highlight some of those things. So first of all, looking at why history matters and a little bit of the context of what we're experiencing right now with immigration. So in 1808, the U.S. Congress bans the importation of slaves. But in 1838, 30 years later, during the Trail of Tears, thousands of Native and indigenous folks are displaced and die being moved from their homelands. About 4,000 Cherokees died on this journey. In 1848, the U.S.-Mexican War ends, and there's territory that's acquired. And it isn't until 1864 that the 14th Amendment in the Constitution endows African Americans with citizenship. Specifically, the question was, are children of formerly enslaved or enslaved people U.S. citizens? That was the question. And the Supreme Court said, yes, that falls into birthright citizenship, and that is why we have the 14th Amendment. In 1882, we have the Chinese Exclusion Act, where the United States government says, these laborers, the Chinese laborers that we brought in to build our railroads, they're having children. What do we do with them? I don't think they should be citizens. And so they attempt to pass an act that says that the children of Chinese immigrants will be excluded from birthright citizenship. Yep, right here in California. And they're unsuccessful. In 1942, we have Executive Order 9066, which, due to the war that was happening at that time, saw Japanese American families and their children put into internment camps for fear that they would be spies during the war. And so discriminated, gated, forcibly moved them from their homes. And in 1957, we have Operation Wetback, where 1.3 million people of Mexican descent were deported back to Mexico. Many of those people were U.S. citizens. So this is not the first instant, and many of those folks are brought in through the Bracero programs, through other programs to come labor in the United States. And then they said, well, there's just too many of them. Let's round up as many as we can and send them back. And there's photos of people on trains being sent back. And in 1965, they end the program. So that's something to really look out for, is as they deported 1.3 million people, they continued to bring people into work. And then finally, we have the Immigration Reform and Control Act, which gave legalization to some of the folks who had been residing in the United States since the 80s. It was very limited, and it was meant to restrict new immigration. It didn't work because during this time, the U.S. was involved in many civil wars across Central America, including Honduras, Nicaragua, and El Salvador. And while they were giving residency or legalization pathways to some people, of course, there were thousands of people who were fleeing the civil wars in their home country that the United States was financing. So, moving into constitutional rights. So, we all have rights under the U.S. Constitution, regardless of your immigration status, but they don't mean anything if you don't exercise them. We have to exercise those rights. So, knowing your rights when it comes to immigration. So, what are your rights when you have the right to remain silent? That's the Fifth Amendment. It is important to vocalize this. Especially what we're seeing right now with the immigration raids, is saying, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. And everything you say could and would be used against you in the court of law. So it's not, I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and then I'm going to share with you about my story, and no, but I have a work permit. No, silence is silence. And lying to an immigration officer could be considered a federal crime. Do not lie. Don't say, oh, well, you know, I have a work permit, I'm applying for my citizenship, and it's not true. The best thing to do in that moment is to remain silent and to not lie. Even if it feels risky, the most information you should provide is your full legal name and your date of birth, especially if you see people recording on video, or if you're recording on video, encourage people to share this because it makes that easier for them to be located if they go into immigration custody. And do not offer information about your legal status. Do not cooperate when there are questions being asked about your legal status. One thing that I always like to preface with these presentations is just because you're not deportable doesn't mean you're not detainable. Right? And if you offer any information about your immigration case, that can be an excuse for them to then detain you. And if you're like me and you have multiple pathways that you explore to try to get your citizenship, you could have 7 ways, and they could have all been the right way. What they can do is make you sit in a detention center while they argue those 7 ways in court. Next. So this is an example of a red card. What they do is it says you have constitutional rights, the right to remain silent, to not answer questions, to not sign anything, and then give this red card to an agent. And then in English it says, I do not wish to speak to you. It talks about your constitutional rights. One thing that has shifted with this new Trump administration is that we recommend that people say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and then hand over the card. We do not have red cards with us here today, but we have the website link, and then also a place where you can obtain them, and we have some Know Your Rights door hangers which function similarly. So the type of IDs to carry if you're undocumented. A driver's license if you're a driver, a school identification, a library identification, a Costco identification, anything that has your picture and your name on it. And anything if you are a legal permanent resident, if you are an asylum seeker, if you have anything that can show that you have a legal case or that you have some type of status or protection from deportation is also important. Now, one important thing to note, because the question comes up, well, can't the ICE agent just ignore that? Unfortunately, yes, they can. That's why it's so important, and we'll get into this later, our rapid response network of people who are coming and recording on video when people's rights are being violated. Can an agent ignore this? Can they ignore the fact that you have a green card or protection from deportation through that guy? Yes, they can, but it is a violation of your rights. What type of ID not to carry? Consular IDs issued from other countries. This is, if it's your only form of ID, that's an exception, but it's best not to, because it can be an excuse to detain you. Because they can argue that you are here undocumented because you don't need to be in the country legally to go to a consulate and get an ID for people outside of. So the matricula consular for Mexicans is something that you can get from a U.S. consulate, a U.S. Mexican consulate. That's a form of identification, but it can be an excuse for you to be detained because it shows that you're a national from another country. Or a valid passport from another country. Only carry it if you need to use it as though it were an ID, for example, in the airport, but even then it's recommended that you have a secondary ID if you're traveling that indicates your protection from deportation. And never carry fake documents with you. That is a crime. And we're looking at moments where federal agents are arresting people with no reason other than racial profiling. So if they have a reason or something justifiable, they're gonna cling to that. So never carry fake documentation. So prepare a family plan. This is extremely important, what we were speaking to earlier. If a family member or loved one is detained, or you don't know when something could happen. We have seen recently that activists, that people who are doing the work of sharing and standing up for community have been targeted by the FBI. And so it's important to have a plan in place and that the rest of your family knows it. So sharing the information of your emergency plan with your family and friends, letting them know who to call, I make my mom share her location with me, and I put contacts into her phone so she knows who to dial. I don't have the tutorial here, but I know that online, someone also said that you could say like, hey Siri, call for help, and you can help set up a way that it could send a message to your family and friends. You have to have an authorization affidavit. We have some copies here. The caretaker affidavit is something where you fill out a paper and you state which one of your family members or close friends is going to care for your children in your absence, and they can take that to the school, they can show that, and these are important because it limits the possibility of your children going into protective services through the state, but instead making sure that they're placed with a someone that you love. Something very heartbreaking that happened during the first Trump administration was when parents were deported and they didn't have caregiver affidavits, some of their children went into state custody and actually went up for adoption. So there are some parents who are living in their home country who will not be reunited with their kids because their kids have been adopted legally into other families. And although I appreciate people opening their homes and their hearts to children who are alone in this moment, the goal is always family reunification. So gather the important documents, keep them in an accessible place, find an immigration lawyer to represent you if you are detained. If you do not have a lawyer, have on hand one of the phone numbers that you can call through Deportation Defense Services, and we have a list of referrals and resources for you as well. Make sure your family knows your alien number if you have one. You have an alien number. If you've ever submitted any type of paperwork for a work permit to adjust your status, you have an alien number. Make sure your family knows it, or if you have friends who are migrants, ask them for it. Say, hey, I care about you. Would you mind sharing your alien number for me in case something happens to you? Why? Because if you haven't seen a loved one in 3 or 4 days, you can go into the USCI websites. There's tutorials online, and you can search them up using their alien number. And that way you're able to see if a loved one is being held, what facility they're being held in. And be prepared for unexpected expenses, such as hiring a lawyer or paying your bond. Unfortunately, when we do see that a lot of nonprofits are oversaturated, you're looking at anywhere between saving up between $1,000 up to $8,000, just depending on how much and how complex your case is. Because sometimes there are cases that nonprofits will say, this is actually too complex for us to handle, and you might have to go through a private attorney. So now, encounters with immigration enforcement. So what to do if they come to your house. First and foremost, do not open the door. Who here has access to Netflix? Anyone here have access to Netflix? You got an account, your cousin has an account. There is, I believe it's called Deportation Nation. There is a series on Netflix, and one of the first episodes is ICE agents in the Midwest going to people's homes, and people willingly open the door. There's a woman whose husband is taken from her, no warrant, and when she asks why, the ICE agents tell her, well, you let us in. And they're attempting, you know, immigrants are attempting to comply. They think that if they do what they're asked to do, there may be, but the first and foremost is do not open the door. Do not let them in. Ask for a warrant. And if there is a warrant, you ask them to slide it under the door, hold it up to the window, and verify that it's signed by a civil judge. We'll get a little bit into those details later. If the order is signed by a judge and includes your name and address, you must allow entry. And so one thing that's really important, and we'll have a physical representation of it, is the name must match yours. So for example, if they say, this is a warrant for Olympia, and I see that it's Olympia with a Y, and I'm Olympia with an I, I'm gonna say that's wrong, that's misspelled. I'm not Olympia with a Y, I'm Olympia with an I. You have to go and get another one. If it says the wrong time or the wrong address, if they say it's for 8101, and I live at 8101 and a half, I'm gonna say that's not valid. I live at 8101 and a half, right? And warrants are specific. So if the warrant says, it has to say they can come into the kitchen or they can come into a bedroom, they're not allowed to just wander through and search your property as they please. If agents enter without permission, deny them access, ask for the search and the arrest warrant, and film them. Do not sign any documents and assert your right to speak with an attorney. So when the agents come, if they force their way into your home, the most important thing you can do is film and state as you're filming, I did not see a warrant. Where is the warrant? And why are you entering without my permission? And then second, it's very important not to sign any documents with an attorney. They specifically take advantage of people who do not speak English, or maybe people who are illiterate, and say, well, this is just basic. Just sign it so that we can move you into the facility. But sometimes they have people signing deportation orders, or signing up their parental rights, or resigning, or giving up the legal protections that they have in this country. So it's very important for people to know that they shouldn't sign anything until they speak to legal counsel. One important and unfortunate action or consequence of this is it can extend the amount of time that you remain in detention because you're waiting for your legal representation. And one thing that we've seen is that ICE has been playing dirty. They haven't been letting people come into the detention centers. They haven't been letting attorneys, politicians, Congress members come in. But it's important to know that that is a violation of human rights. And then, yeah, don't agree to unnecessary requests from ICE. If they say, oh, can you talk a little bit out loud, they don't need to ask for that. If they ask you to, can I use your restroom? You don't have to let them use your restroom. Don't let them in your house. If they have a warrant, don't let them anywhere beyond where that warrant says they can be. So, some sample warrants. This is really important. The ICE/administrative warrant, this can be signed in someone's car, and it's not a judicial warrant. Now, if ICE happens to run into someone outside on the street with an administrative warrant, they do have the right to detain that person. But this warrant does not grant them the right to come in and search your private property, or to come in and to enter your home. For that, you need a judicial warrant from a court, from a United States District Court, and it has to be signed by a judge. And you can see in the example that it has a date, a time, and it's signed at the bottom. And you actually even have the right to say, yeah, give me a second, I'm gonna go ahead and call them and verify that a judge actually signed this warrant and that it's a valid warrant. You have the right to do that. That's not doing too much. Your car. Do we have a slide on cars? Oh, there you go. So, go back. So when it comes to cars, your car is your personal property, so they still need a warrant to search your vehicle. Right? When you see officers who are saying, oh, like, we pulled you over to track at fixed stop or outside of court, we need to search your vehicle and whoever's in it, they can't do that. They need a warrant because your car is your personal property. Next. So what to do if ICE shows up to your workplace? The immigration agents need to have a search warrant signed by a judge. And if the agents only present an administrative warrant, your employer is not obligated to give them permission to enter the workplace. This is a policy that I think is really important because you have rights as a worker and you have rights as an employer. So as someone who oversees a team that goes out into public and is doing door-to-door canvassing, we have a policy where if they're approached by ICE, they're supposed to tell the ICE representative, I am at work right now. This is my designated workplace. I will not speak to you. You can call my manager. You have to speak to my manager to authorize any interaction with us. They call me and I say no. If there's a warrant, you can drive to where I am and you can present it to me. But other than that, unless you have a warrant for any of my staff members, they're free to continue doing their job because they are at work right now. And then in your workplace, as an employer, you have the right to put up signs and say, without a warrant, you cannot enter here. This is private property. You cannot enter. I don't consent to you searching my workplace. I don't consent to you speaking with my staff.
So my question is, does that mean that Home Depot could put those signs on their gates as folks drive in and not acquiesce to the behaviors that ICE has been rounding up day laborers on their property?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it would depend how Home Depot defined the parking lot versus the inside of their, because they have to distinguish between the public property and the private property. If it is private property, they absolutely have the right to say. Now, what we do see is workplace raids, right? And we have heard conflicting information where the federal government claims that raids are done with consent of the employers, but then they wouldn't be a raid, right? Yeah.
It depends, because if it's a public space, right, space that's private but publicly open, yeah, so like Home Depot, basically everything is there in that area is open to the public, but yeah, but if the public can get on into that space, they can. Only places they can't get into are locked spaces, but those locked spaces, if you leave the door unlocked, they may just walk in. So whether or not they may be able, they're not technically able to, but you can't necessarily expect them to follow all the law. You know what I mean? So are they just splitting hairs then? No, I mean they're going to be in the spaces that they're allowed to be in, and the locked spaces, keep the door locked. Have a sign, no one beyond this point. But if you don't have that, it's going to be harder to make the argument. But even if they do violate, let's say, a civil right, once they have someone in their custody, they have them in their custody, and if they're unlawfully here, it's just like there may not be much of a remedy. There are rights without remedies.
Hello, everyone. Good to be here today. Thank you. Can you go over, because I'm hearing a lot about collateral arrest?
Yeah, so collateral arrest refers to when, and this is why it's important, collateral arrest refers to when ICE is serving a warrant for a specific person and they show up either to the wrong address or where other people are present in the home and then take other people who the warrant is not for. And that's why the best course of action is to not open the door, and if they have a signed warrant to, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but to your point that, yeah, to Jesse's point, is that locking the doors of the other rooms in the home so that this is the person, this is what some organizations have recommended is if there is a warrant for one specific person and there are other people in the home, to have that person step outside and close the door behind them and say, I'm the person the warrant is for. And they're reducing collateral pickups because they can't get access to other people in the home. This, we also saw this a few months ago when they went to serve a warrant at a home, and a young person happened to be outside in the front yard, and they were picked up by immigration. And so they would be a collateral pickup because the warrant was not meant for them, but I saw them and decided to detain them.
We have a community church, and what we decided, I don't even know if it's right, wrong, or indifference, but we decided if we see ICE or anyone pull up, that if any individual who feels uncomfortable, that we're going to allow them to go in the church and lock the door, and because we do most of our activities outside. And then request for administrative warrant. Is that proper?
Yeah, and we're actually going to get into that a little bit later in the presentation. Okay. But I appreciate you uplifting that because, again, to Jesse's point, you're then moving them from what is the publicly accessible space of your church to the private space behind a locked door. And then, yeah. So this is really important because this has been a major shift from the way that we operated during the first Trump administration and now, is before we had what were called sensitive locations. And so, according to a memorandum that was published by ICE in 2011, they were supposed to limit activities at certain sensitive places, which were seen as sanctuary spaces, and this included public schools, K through 12, hospitals, community clinics and treatment centers, religious congregation centers. This was removed in January of this year. So I remember being a child in California and seeing a story of a woman on the news who, when she was being pursued by immigration, went to her local church and she remained there for months as immigration tried to pull her and her children out to put them into deportation proceedings. This may look differently now because it was removed in 2025. And it was meant to address this, right? To make sure, this is why we're seeing ICE going into places like hospitals, where previously they would have been limited. It's why we see them waiting for women who have just given birth or people who are going for life support. Yes, we saw recently that there was a woman who was in a hospital who was there to give birth, and ICE looked for her and looked for access to that hospital. Yes, and places of worship as well. So then next. So what can faith leaders do? They can establish clear boundaries, so they can delineate public versus private areas, clearly mark which are public accessible to anyone and which are restricted areas. This is like offices or meeting rooms. And then it's recommended that you have signage or physical barriers, something that shows physically that this is a private space.
And I just wanted to, I don't want to like butt in, but like your question, it sounds a lot like the concept of sanctuary, where people like in medieval times used to be able to run churches and take sanctuary from law enforcement. And that's a concept that I think has become a myth in America today, that you can run to a church and you can ask for sanctuary. That's not really true. But that's actually not the law. I'm not sure, is that kind of what you were kind of referencing, the idea of sanctuary?
What I was referencing to is a safe space for people. And then, when there's a safe space, then they can identify what is legal and not legal. So I would bring you in any room in my sanctuary, or in my church. Even if it's an office, bathroom, whatever it is. It will be in there, but the thing is, they just can't come and overrun without us knowing the vision. And that's why I'm here today, to make sure I'm doing the right thing and protecting, because my congregation is multicultural. We even have a refrain from like our Wednesday community, and also a Russian group that's in our community meetings. Sorry, coordinator. But what I'm trying to say, I have, as a pastor, I have to protect my whole congregation, no matter if it's on a Wednesday or a Sunday. So I want, what we do, we put them, what we establish, we hadn't had an issue. We will put them inside and request what they want. They can't just come and overrun. That means they can bring me out if they do that. So, yeah.
So I think two important points to really just kind of highlight or be very careful about.
Okay.
One is that definitely the idea of sanctuary from a church is a myth, but as a private organization, your private spaces are your private spaces, and they would need a warrant. But on that note, remember how you word it is very important. You don't want to subject yourself to federal criminal charges also. So that's a possibility. So your messaging has to be very, very clear. And when I say clear, let me step back. It has to be very intentional, and you have to be very strategic with it.
Can you give us an example?
Yeah, that's.
Give us an
if
example.
they have the wording, I would like to have it.
So as an example, if you were to say undocumented people can come here and hide from ICE, that would be breaking the law. Potentially would be breaking the law. But if you were to like informally have an understanding that congregation members can come there for like support, I just would stay away from intentionally using language that implies or that states you're going to help someone break the law. So that's what I would say.
Okay.
So I would just be careful with the messaging.
Okay.
You just have to figure out how to communicate it.
Can you
and be strategic?
Attorney, can you give us an example of a messaging that would be appropriate according to law? If someone was in front of Gethsemane and we brought him into the sanctuary and we locked the gates, right? And ICE was outside the gate, but we wouldn't let him in because the gates are locked. And we start conversating through the gate. What would be an example of a messaging that would be appropriate according to law?
Well, if you have people inside already, you could basically just tell them you can't come in, you can't search, because
Yeah.
they would have to establish like your intention to break the law on one end of it,
Yeah.
and you can just you don't have to give them an answer. You have the right to remain silent. So it's just like that's something really important to remember. If they're in the space already, I think the biggest potential risk is your initial messaging. If they're in the space, you don't have to let them in. You don't have to let law enforcement in, because you're not trying to help them necessarily subvert the law, but they're your congregation and maybe you don't want any part of it. But right now things are changing. They just arrested a judge not too long ago for helping somebody go out the back way while ICE agents were coming in the front way. So I mean, it's a kind of blow by blow moment, something we have to be really on top of, but doesn't mean that there isn't a way.
Yeah,
And-
sorry.
And even if don't they have to have a warrant?
To come in, yeah. So
Yeah.
she established two different types
Yeah,
of
I
warrants.
saw that. I
The
saw
first
that.
one is an administrative warrant, which
Yeah.
is a non-judge signed warrant, maybe a commissioner or some even maybe a supervisor.
Right.
It's basically saying we're going to arrest this person.
Yeah.
And the other one is a real warrant, right? A judicially signed warrant by a judge and a magistrate, and that one can give them the right to search and seize. And that's what, like, what do you call it? Fourth Amendment warrant? Yeah, it's a Fourth Amendment warrant.
I have one question. If ICE will come and not show the proper identification that they are federal agents, what would be the legal way of not responding? So-
And there are oftentimes a lot of laws, and you know, Chris would actually probably be able to explain that better.
Okay.
He does civil rights law. So as far as the idea of a right without a remedy, and I think this is something you've probably dealt with a bit, right? So maybe.
Yeah.
And it's changing
so
every day, isn't it?
It is.
It
so
seemed to
something-
be, as she said it.
Yeah, an example I wanted to give is, for example, the Know Your Rights presentations, right? They have been misconstrued by some folks on the opposition, and some of the people who have been able to be arrested. Is there has been a claim that Know Your Rights presentations, such as this one, are for the purpose of evading law enforcement or for evading the purpose of capture. And to Jesse's point, it's that intent, right? But the intention of the Know Your Rights and the Know Your Rights we're doing right now is to make community aware of their constitutional rights and make everyone aware of their constitutional rights, not only people who are at risk for deportation. And very similarly, when you are with your congregation, is that your church is a safe space for everyone, regardless of their legal status, and cannot be searched without a warrant. But
Yeah, you can.
That's what I want to know.
I'm just gonna add, mic check, 1, 2. I'm just gonna add, you can be as vague and ambiguous as you need to be. You know what I mean? You don't need to be specific. In fact, the more vague and ambiguous you are, ultimately to the point of being silent on certain things, you know what I mean, is generally speaking, I would say, the best way to protect yourself and others.
yeah, thank you for uplifting that. And so to the question of what can faith leaders do is you can delineate the public versus the private areas broadly and always, not just in the scope of migration, but regardless of who it is, right? It could be any type of law enforcement. You say these are private areas that you need a warrant. These are public areas that are open to community. And then always using signs or physical barriers can be helpful, because then again, going back to the intent piece, you can say, I'm exercising my right to remain silent. You see the sign. This is private. You need a warrant. Gives you time to call someone. But then to Chris's point as well, you want to just exercise that you have the right to remain silent, and don't let them question you, because they're going to try to establish that you're doing this to go against law enforcement.
I was just going to ask, because during this presentation, it's come clear that many people, and I hadn't really thought about it, with an undocumented status especially, are afraid to come to trainings like this when they hear about them. What about the prospect, because it crossed my mind, perhaps smaller, like in-home, in someone's home training, and just quietly putting the word out to people, so that it's not publicly announced, but to get more people to come in. What kind of legal issue might that present? I mean, could we lock the door or not let them in if there were a group of them here, and we were doing small group training?
Yeah, your home is your home. So if someone decides to host a Know Your Rights training in their own home, they're having a house meeting, right? Like, that's the model that we're using. They're having a house meeting to talk about issues affecting their community. And unless someone has a warrant specifically to search during that house meeting, during the time of the house meeting, at that address for a person who lives and resides there,
So
they can't come in.
only be for someone who lives and resides there, not somebody that might be attending.
Yeah, because I find it, well, all different, but I find it difficult that they might think that, can they serve a warrant for someone, for a physical address to someone who doesn't reside there? Yeah.
Well, good, then we're going to be having a whole lot of little private home,
Yes, house
know your
meetings,
rights trainings.
You know, you have to, have the address of where the person is going to be residing,
Yeah. So I hope that we could go into the next slide. So other things that faith leaders can do, to your point, is you can train your staff and volunteers on what to do when they encounter agents. And again, not for the purpose of evading capture or evading law enforcement, but for the purpose of them knowing and being able to share with the rest of the community what their constitutional rights are, and then establishing proper procedures. And then providing resources. You can provide Know Your Rights materials to everyone in your congregation, and you can help your members establish emergency plans in case something happens, making sure that they have those caregiver affidavits. So important information that your whole family should have is names, phone numbers, the date of birth of everyone living in the childhood, phone numbers for children's, doctors, schools, medical conditions, consulate numbers for people who are aware of your situation. This is for you to have in your own home. And this first part, names, phone numbers, and date of births, are really important. I have a family member who has a birthday in January, but when they came to this country and filed their paperwork, the government made a mistake and they put that his birthday was in February and he never bothered to fix it. So if I use his January birthday to try to find him, or to try to use it, that's not going to work out, because legally, like, his paperwork is under a different birthday. Also, 4 names. I have 4 names. So I always tell people, because I have students, right, where they'll just use one first name and one last name. So if you have a uncle whose nickname is Joe, but his full name is Joseph, what would it be, like Joseph Adam Smith Burke? You're not going to be able to find him as just Joseph Smith or Joe Smith, right? You need all 4 of those names, because that would be what would be on his legal or immigration paperwork. And then you would need the accurate date of birth as it appears on their paperwork or their documentation, their legal paperwork. So that part is really important, especially for my migrant and my Latino folks. We have a lot of names, and sometimes we call each other. I have a cousin. named Adrian. I didn't find out that his first name was Javier until I was maybe like 16, right? But if I look up Adrian, I'm not gonna find him. And then other documents to keep safe and accessible, if you need to, is marriage certificates, visas, any correspondence that you've had with immigration, caregiver affidavits, social security cards, immunization cards. And this is important for you to have, but also if you're leaving minors in the care of family, for them to have when it comes to things that they have to turn in for school, etc. And then also, if someone is caring for your children, giving them a special heads up about little activities or routines that they like to do. If they're used to watching Coco Melon every night before going to bed, or they really like Miss Rachel on Saturday mornings, that's important because as they're going through, to Pastor Bishop's point, through grief and loss, establishing some of those basic routines and maintaining them will be important for that child to feel a little bit more secure and safe as they're being cared for by someone who isn't their parent. And so, avoid becoming a victim of immigration fraud. This one is really important for folks here, for folks who have loved ones, is attorneys undergo rigorous education and bar exams on immigration law specifically, while notaries do not require extensive legal training. Why bring up notaries? In many Latin American countries and some Caribbean countries, notaries are able to fill out and file legal paperwork. They can do what a lawyer can do. And this is something that I experienced a lot, is that people would go to a notary and they'd say, yeah, I can help you apply for citizenship. A notary is not and should not be doing that. So making sure that, and attorneys can provide legal advice, represent clients in court, and notaries can't offer legal advice or representation. They may be able to do things like have witnesses, notarize documents, translate things, and they play a role in having the proper legal paperwork, but they don't replace immigration lawyers. And then attorneys follow strict ethical standards and are held accountable by bar associations, and they have a fiduciary duty to act in their clients' best interests. So you also have a level of accountability with attorneys. And so that's why when I do Know Your Rights presentations and people speak about their specific immigration cases, my best suggestion is for them to have a consultation with an attorney, because multiple people can have very similar, almost identical immigration cases and have a completely different outcome from them.
I have a question.
Yes?
Currently, where I'm living, I've lived there now almost 3 years, and before that I lived somewhere for 15 years. And I put it in an address just when I moved, of course, 3 years ago. But what I'm seeing now is recently I'm getting mail for other people, Hispanics, Vietnamese. I'm getting mail from people, and one was even on my return. You know how they put the yellow sticky? Now, I moved 3 years ago, and it even had a yellow sticky routing it from my previous address to my current address.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sending, well, now I'm throwing it in the trash. I don't know. I was giving it back to the mailman, don't live here, but, you know, it's just really weird.
Yeah, I agree that is really weird. I don't have kind of any advice or feedback on that, other than giving it back to the mail person is probably your best option for them to kind of figure out. Same thing happened to me during the pandemic. We moved into our home, and a lot of EDSS? Employment Disability Services, things like that, a lot of different names that came to our address, and what we did is we just returned them to the post person.
Yes, just quickly, because that throwing it in the trash will not work. It'll change nothing. And sometimes, in some cases, because that happened to me, in some cases, people at the post office told me, some cases when you trash mail like that you know is not yours and don't return it, you can be liable for that. So, yeah, give it back to the mailman.
Awesome. Thank you. I want to move us along, just because we also have the tenants Know Your Rights that I want to get us through, because I know people came here for distinct reasons. Again, what I want to emphasize at the beginning, and then also that Jesse and Chris have highlighted, is knowing your rights adds a layer When folks come in, we also know that many of these immigration agents aren't actually immigration agents, right? They may be bounty hunters or people who are cosplaying or pretending or impersonating officers. But we're seeing a lot of violence right now that's happening against our communities. And we're seeing moments where constitutional rights may be violated. And it's heartbreaking, but to Jesse's point, there was a lawsuit of migrants who had their constitutional rights violated. Unfortunately, over half of the plaintiffs were deported before the case could be heard, and then other folks felt unsupported, they felt scared, and they also dropped, so the case didn't actually get to go to court, and those people didn't see justice. So that's why part of it is so important, is impeding unlawful targeting of community members. So one update that actually just happened yesterday afternoon is that because of a lawsuit that was presented in Los Angeles, there is a 14-day temporary restraining order that was granted by a judge because the judge determined that the immigration enforcement in Southern California was based on profiling. And so the judge, it was brought to him, and the judge said, yes, I agree that the enforcement that's happened up until now, it's based on targeting people. And so what this does is, it's very important to understand that that doesn't mean that immigration enforcement will cease, right? But it did put a temporary restraining order on the roving patrols. What does that mean? The folks who are driving to the Home Depots, the folks who are driving to the car washes and questioning and detaining and arresting people simply because of the way they looked, or they have to determine why, right? That doesn't mean that they won't continue to serve warrants for people who previously had criminal charges, for people who had previous orders of deportation, that they won't follow people after their court cases, right? They still have the right to, as immigration enforcement, serve warrants to people that are signed by judges for orders of deportation. But what this does is it limits their ability to profile and to indiscriminately pick up people, or you could say use discriminatory practices to decide who they're going to target. However, we don't know if they're going to respect that. And so one really important thing here is community resources. We have the Los Angeles Rapid Response Network, and so this is a phone number. We also have cards here on this table with this phone number on there. If you see immigration enforcement, call this number. What they do is they have a network of trained responders who will mobilize to the location, who will take videos, and who will file reports of the events that they've been seeing. And one of the reasons that this is so important is because right now that we're seeing this temporary restraining order, we have to also document if that temporary restraining order is being violated. If these cars are still driving through neighborhoods, intimidating people, rolling up to places where they know that majority and predominantly Latino folks gather. And so the hotline staff will be notified, and organizing leads will take action. And then once the nearest first responder is identified and deployed, they'll be there for the ICE activity. And then they'll report back to the team. So one thing that I want to, next slide, that I want to highlight is we see two different types of first responders in these situations. We have seen some groups that go out and they patrol, right? They look for ICE, they follow them, and they will, in some instances, physically get between ICE and the people who are being detained. The Rapid Response Network, that's not their role. The role of the Rapid Response Network is to document the incidents, to record them, and to file reports that this is happening. Right? And so I'm not here to tell you which one of those groups you should join. I follow both of them on Instagram to receive updates, but just letting you know that the roles that they play are very distinct, where some of these groups are directly pushing back, and that's their personal choice, and may be subject to, in some instances, obstructing justice. And there are other groups who are showing up, and their role is not to resist or keep people from being taken, but to record and document what's happening. And so the Rapid Response Network verifies ICE activity, because the other thing that we don't want is for people to be posting, ICE is here, ICE is there. folks are afraid to go outside already, and then it turns out that it was something different, right? It's a DEA warrant, it's a police, it's something involving the sheriffs. It also interviews community for community findings through encrypted signals. And if they witness arrest, they record and take pictures to document any malpractices. And they offer and inform other community residents of ICE presence to verify when there are credible threats in the area. Next. And so these are the different immigration, we have different immigration assistance lines, and then we also have a phone number for people who need help finding legal representation. With the understanding that not all of the nonprofits do all of the services, there are some nonprofits that may do immigration services for people who are filing for an adjustment of status, a U visa, temporary protected status, whatever it is, but they may not do deportation defense. So calling this phone number can help you find an attorney that can help with a specific case of someone who's in detention fighting a deportation. And then here are some other organizations, Chirla, Carecen, the ILRC, and the ACLU, who have all published extensive documentation. This is very much the tip of the iceberg. There are more in-depth trainings on the legality. ACLU is a great resource. The Immigrant Legal Resource Center, who focus on different things and can give different resources to folks to understand what they can do and how they can support the migrant community. And then this is my phone number and my email. If folks would like to, are interested, right, in a Know Your Rights presentation, or are interested in seeing how they can be connected to other partners, or even, I know that some trusted folks are going through the Rapid Response Network trainings. They're constantly bringing in new people, because in areas like this, the best way that we can get information out to the community and verify that it's true is to have as many people as possible who can look at that signal chat and say, oh, there's something happening on Hoover and Adams. I don't know if those streets intersect, my bad. But there's something happening on, I'll say Slauson and Figueroa. A few days ago, there was a massive checkpoint at Slauson and Figueroa. And so the Rapid Response Network was able to have folks go and check, and they said, you know what, this is actually an LAPD DUI checkpoint, not an immigration enforcement stop. But regardless, that's a busy intersection that community may not want to report to out of fear, etc. And so it helps to be able to communicate effectively with what's happening, instead of, we all know the Facebook, the TikTok, the Instagram, that you can get some good news from there, but it's not always credible or accurate. Whew, thank you. Now we're gonna jump into the next one. Okay, so let's just take a couple seconds to just wiggle a little bit. You don't have to wiggle your body, maybe just wiggle your fingers, wiggle your shoulders. I know that we've been a little antsy. Can we give the attorney a chance to just address some of the questions? Sure.
All right. So I just wanted to, before we get into the next portion, first of all, Olympia, I want to say that was amazing. Give her a hand. As I get ready to speak on what Rebuild All of LA is about. Right, absolutely. So, everybody, my name is Chris Martin, and I am a civil rights attorney and a son of South Central Los Angeles. A proud son of South Central Los Angeles, grew up on 43rd and Central Avenue. And I'm here because no one in our community should have to live in fear simply for being here. Bishop Smith, this is a spiritual moment right now. It's a spiritual moment. And I believe that God is on our side. And I believe that ultimately his answer to whether or not he will help us, whether or not he will help the immigrants, the undocumented, is amen. So let the church say amen. Let the church say amen. God has spoken, so let the church say amen. Yeah. God is on our side. The foreigner among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself. For you were foreigners in Egypt. That is Leviticus 19:34. Black folk, remember your struggle. Remember how it feels to be poor and oppressed. And remember that ultimately God calls us to defend the rights of the poor and oppressed. That is Psalm 82:3-4. Let me be clear. Today is about more than just legal rights. It's about a moral responsibility and a collective power that we as human beings have. To my immigrant brothers and sisters, you have rights, whether you are documented or undocumented. As Sister Olympia said, if ICE comes to your door, you do not have to let them in unless they have a signed warrant from a judge. Not just a paper with ICE on it, but a real court order. You have the right to remain silent. You don't have to tell them where you're from. You don't have to answer any questions. You don't have to sign anything without a lawyer. Do not sign anything without a lawyer, because ICE will try to get you to waive your rights. But most importantly, don't run and don't panic. But don't cooperate blindly. You are allowed to say, I choose to remain silent and I want to speak to a lawyer. You should say that unequivocally. For those of us who are allies, we need to be vigilant, for we are all one people, all brothers and sisters in the Lord. And we need to document what we see. We need to show up when families are targeted. We need to demand that local leaders stop working with ICE. We need to be witnesses, but not bystanders. If you see ICE in action, document it safely. Take photos, video, take badge numbers, take car license plates. Share what is happening with the world and connect people to legal help. Brothers and sisters, we also got to get ourselves trained. Join a local rapid response team or a legal observer program. Join COCO. Get connected with the ACLU. Yeah, get connected with Gethsemane. As Sister Olympia said, learn the difference between a judicial warrant and an administrative warrant. It can save somebody's family. Know your neighbors. Check in with your undocumented friends, your coworkers, and your fellow church members. Help them to make family preparedness plans so that their kids and loved ones know what to do if ICE shows up. Brothers and sisters, we also got to push policy. Call the city council members and demand that they cut ties between LAPD and ICE. We live in the 9th district, so we need to be calling up Curran Price and telling him what we want him to do. That is his job as a city councilman. Support sanctuary policies, not just symbolic ones, but real protections. Support each other financially and emotionally. Offer rides. translation, food, or childcare during stressful times. And let people know that they are not alone. This is about community. It's about dignity. It's about unity. It's about black and brown together. We are stronger when we protect each other. And this is what we mean when we say to rebuild all of LA. Because ultimately, we can't rebuild anything unless we protect each other. So no more displacement, no more criminalization, no more separation. We rebuild all of LA when we build trust, build safety, and build black and brown solidarity. So I invite you all to take action today. We will be passing out flyers, and I encourage you to please sign our petition. Even if you can take out your phones and go to the petition at tinyurl.com/rebuildallofla and share with your family, your block, your place of worship, and keep on showing up, because black and brown unity is how we win. I thank you. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you. I am back. Thank you so much for sharing that and for uplifting one of the pressing issues here in South Los Angeles, which is housing right, housing access. And then what we're seeing is a record number of evictions. In April and May, we saw upwards of about 3,000 evictions being processed, with the top 3 reasons being failure to pay rent at the top, but then also seeing that the average amount of rent owed was about $4,000. So that transitions us into our next Know Your Rights presentation, which we have done in collaboration with Bethzetic. Bethzetic is a legal services provider that does lots of wonderful work, including housing. We have referrals we'll be providing to Bethzetic and their legal services, as well as the National Council for Jewish Women of Los Angeles. And so first, going into our tenants' rights, and then I'll be able to provide a little bit more information on who our partners are, the services that they offer, and how you can obtain a referral for your loved one to access those services. So, in this presentation, what we will cover is basic California tenants' rights, the eviction protections, relocation assistance, an overview of the eviction process, and then how to get legal help. So every California tenant who pays rent has the following rights under the state law: the right to live in a safe and habitable home, the right to written notice of entry, rent increases, and a permitted reason for eviction in writing. Can't just be a phone call, can't just be coming up to yell at you at your door. Formal legal process prior to eviction, the right to exclusive use and enjoyment of the space you rent within reason. You can't have a rave every day at 3 in the morning. And then freedom from harassment, discrimination, and retaliation. Next. So what are eviction protections in Los Angeles, and what do they include? So your landlord needs a just cause to evict you. Tenants sometimes get money. In certain cases, I recommend that folks come a little bit closer to be able to see when I cover that, because what Oli from Coco is not saying is that you will receive money in the case of an eviction, but that it is a possibility for specific groups. Special protections for older, disabled, and low-income tenants, and then just highlighting that these protections don't apply to new tenancies, so people who have been tenants for less than a year, or tenants who share a kitchen or a bathroom with their landlord. It does have to be a real kitchen or bathroom, a hot plate or 2, and a sink. Does not a kitchen make. So next. So just cause protection. So what does that mean? That just cause means that landlords need an allowed reason to evict. So landlords can't evict you for no reason at all, and these includes for cause and no fault reasons. There are some moments where it could be something that you did, it could be your fault. There are also things that are not your fault that may result in an eviction. So what does this mean? Just cause protections are like rent control for evictions. And rent control limits evictions. Just cause limits the reasons that you can be evicted. Next. So at fault reasons for evictions. You owe rent, you violate your lease, you commit nuisance or a crime, back to that piece about raves every night at 3 in the morning, and then you refuse to provide the landlord reasonable access to property. That does not mean that you need to let your landlord come in anytime they want because they called you and they said, I'll be there in 5 minutes, I'm coming in. It means that you can't say, well, you can't actually access my property for the next like 3 to 6 months, right? You have to work with them. And then if you lose your job as your landlord's employee. So you may also be evicted through no fault. But in this case of a no fault eviction, you may be able to receive rental relocation assistance. So some reasons for no fault evictions are that your landlord or the relevant relative wants to move in. We see this frequently with single family homes. That's when there's only one house on the property, is they want to move back in. Or their children want to move in. The building will be torn down or no longer rented. The landlord is converting the building to affordable housing. Primary renovation work and government order requires move out. And again, part of the reason we're providing referrals is it gets more into specifics. But let's get into what this actually means. So what does this actually mean? That for both at fault or no fault evictions, there are two groups. At fault is if the landlord accuses you of being the reason that you're being evicted. And no fault is if the landlord chooses to evict you even if you're not doing anything wrong. And the cases in which a landlord must pay relocation assistance is only if it's a no fault eviction, if the rental unit was built on or before October 1st, 1978, and the rental unit is not a single family home. That means apartments, or a duplex, or a triplex. The exception is condos built on or before October 1st, 1978. So what does this mean? If your landlord is evicting you because they accuse you of something, then you don't receive relocation assistance. If your landlord is evicting you even though you did nothing wrong, then you may qualify for relocation assistance. If it is, back to the last slide, if it is a unit that was built on or before October 1st, 1978, or if it's not a single family home, so duplexes, triplexes, apartments. So who qualifies for relocation assistance, right? Because there are specific groups of people that qualify. So first, a qualified tenant is someone who is 62 years of age or older, has disabilities, and has one or more minor dependent children. Ineligible tenants are all other tenants. Relocation assistance depends on the length of time that you live in the unit and what your income is. A low-income tenant is a tenant whose income is 80% or less of the area median income as adjusted for household size, as defined by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, regardless of the length of tenancy. And then the tenant residing in a building owned by a mom and pop landlord, those are reduced relocation assistance payments. That's basically recognizing that small landlords, people who maybe own a property or two, will not be expected to pay out the same amount of relocation assistance as a corporate landlord or someone who owns multiple apartment buildings may be required to pay. So this is the relocation assistance bulletin. This has an example of what someone may be able to receive. So a person who is in an eligible household who has been there with tenants for 3 years or more may be eligible to receive up to $12,950. The income limits are significant. So for one person the income limit is $70,000 a year, and for 8 people, the income limit is $133,000 a year. So I want to go back to the previous one really quickly. So this is why it's important. If any of this is resonating with you or with a loved one, we recommend that you come and you get a referral from us, because someone who is one of our partners may be able to actually walk you through this and help you determine how much you or your loved ones qualify for. So for example, in my household, it's myself, my husband, and then my mom lives with us. My mom is a senior, she's 66, but there are no minor children in the house. And then so depending on our incomes, her age, ours, that it might be a little bit different if we were asked to relocate, and maybe only one of us, maybe she would be the only person who would qualify for relocation assistance. We would have to talk to an attorney first to figure it out. So how can I get evicted? If there's one thing that folks walk away from this presentation from, it's how can I get evicted? The process takes about 6 to 8 weeks. And learning your rights can help, and it's important to learn your rights and get help by contacting Beth Zedek. And so if we're looking at kind of the timeline, is it begins with a notice, then a summons and a complaint, then the tenant files an answer, and then you go to court. After court, there will either be a settlement, in which case it ends at the settlement. There may be a trial. If the trial is dismissed, it ends at the dismissal. And if during trial, either the tenant wins or the tenant loses. Right? And so the notice is only the first step. Because I understand that sometimes community members panic, they receive a notice and they say, I need to leave right now. That is step 1. If you receive a notice, you still have time to contact a lawyer and to get legal support. And it is absolutely important that at the minute you receive a notice that you begin to fight, because you still have time. Next. So what does this mean? There's time to fight. And evictions don't happen overnight. A landlord can't legally just tell you to leave. And I know that it can sound scary. It sounds a little too good to be true. I remember, it wasn't even our landlord that told us. This place, COVID had just started. The lockdown order was in March. And in April, almost May, a property manager we had never met in our 20 years of living there, showed up and said, well, we're not evicting you, we're terminating your lease. I said, what? They said, yeah, we're not, because I said there's an eviction moratorium right now. And they said, well, we're not evicting you right now. That's not what's happening. We're saying that you have a month-to-month lease and we're choosing not to renew your lease. And so you have to leave by August of 2020. Right? We actually ended up taking our landlord to court, because in the process of trying to defend ourselves from the eviction, we found out that the place where we lived in was not habitable. And we wouldn't have known if he had not tried to evict us in the middle of a global pandemic. Right? And so we decided to seek out legal recourse. And so all California tenants have a right to the legal eviction court process, including undocumented tenants. This is a big one. Many undocumented and migrant folks come, they find a landlord, maybe someone who's renting them an ADU, a garage, a bedroom, and they think, you know what, I'm just happy that they didn't ask me for a social security number. I'm just happy to have somewhere to live. I'm just happy that me and my children are not living on the street, and they don't ask questions. And then when the landlord says, you have to get out right now or else X, Y, and Z, they say, okay, that makes sense, I'm gonna go. But everyone has housing rights regardless of your legal status. So if you get an eviction notice, seek help right away. We have resources at the end of the presentation. So notices can come with different times depending on the type of eviction. That's a 3-day, a 30-day, a 60-day, or a 90-day. And it will look like this: 3-day, the notice, eviction, and move out, the plaintiff, the dependent. So one really important thing about the eviction notice, because we have some community members that come and say to us, yeah, my landlord gave me a 30-day and then 2 weeks later he gave me a 3-day. Is this very much like the judicial warrants that we were talking about when we were during the Know Your Rights for Immigration? Is the eviction notices must be signed. Yeah, thank you. They must be signed and they must be stamped. Because again, this is an initiation of a legal process. If your landlord is giving you one of these and it's not signed and it's not stamped, it's not valid. By a judge and by a court. Next. So what does this mean? Tenants don't have to move right when they receive a notice. Notices can't be texted, emailed, or given verbally. Again, this has to be a physical document that is signed and stamped. And then an invalid notice may help stop an eviction. So it's important to keep screenshots, save voicemails, anything that you can show to your attorney to help decide whether or not your landlord is moving legally, and then if they are, what are the next steps for you as a tenant. This is a summons. Now this is important. It's kind of blurry, but it says summons, judicial citation, unlawful detain and eviction. It has the notice to the defendant. It says you are being sued by the plaintiff, and then it should have the details of the courthouse. It has the details of you, the landlord, and it must be correct. So if you receive a summons, that is a notice to appear in court, you must respond within 10 business days. If you have a friend, a family member who receives a summons, what are you going to tell them? What are you going to tell them if your friend says, I got a summons for an eviction? You tell them you need to respond within 10 days. That's very important. If not, you lose. You have to get legal help immediately. I know that we, as a community, get really stressed out when we see the 30-day notice, the 3-day notice, but that's not the scary part. The summons is. If you receive a summons, your time is limited. So the summons and complaint for an unlawful detainer is the legal term for the court papers for an eviction. And this is only the beginning of the court process. So one thing that I want to emphasize is, you remember that chart? The court process is only step like 3 or 4 out of 6. But, so there's still the process of going to court. But you must contact an attorney that same day. Was that a question? You've never seen a 3-day eviction notice with a stamp? Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, recently I did a pro bono unlawful detainer. It was voluntarily dismissed by the client, or not by the client, by the landlord, because of a deficiencies in the 30-day pay quit. One of the deficiencies was it actually wasn't the stamp part, because you should be able to deliver to somebody without it being stamped by the county clerk and signed by the county clerk. It's a private document, so that private document, once you serve it, that notifies them of it, but it needs to meet certain criteria. The criteria is it needs to be signed by the eviction person, but mostly it's got to outline the reason why, the exact amount, the exact amount, if it's due to non-payment of rent, and the exact period. It's got to highlight everything, and it's a very, very not complex, but it's a very detailed form. If you get one thing wrong, they'll just they'll lose, and they'll have to start the whole process over again.
I'm gonna repeat that for the folks that are listening. So one thing that was uplifted was that when there is the unlawful detainer, that is something that has to be specific. If there's a certain amount of unpaid rent, it has to write in there the specific amount of money owed, the period of time which the complaint is taking place, and it should be detailed. And if those details are wrong, then you can push back and contest it.
One thing, and then also how they act, right? let's say the person I was representing paid a month of rent, and they accepted the money. If they accept the money, it starts all over again. They need to issue a new one. So it's the defects in the 3-day or 30-day pay or quit is oftentimes the reason people win, because it's just like they weren't careful. So I mean, I just wanted to put that the stamp, the county clerk stamp. I've never actually seen. I mean, I've only seen a few, but a couple. So it's just, yeah. There are other defects you can look for sure, though.
Yeah, so some other things that that you can look for was that if there is a certain amount of rent owed that's stated, and the person did pay a month of rent and the landlord accepted that, then the process starts all over again, and that's something that has to be included in the details of the reasoning for the eviction, right? They can't just say, oh, you didn't pay rent for 6 months, but on the 3rd month you did pay rent and they accepted it. Thank you. Ricky. So, status of COVID-19 protections. We know it's been several years, but just letting folks know that most protections have expired, and that tenants who had their rent deferred must pay rent to avoid eviction. And coming back to that statistic that I shared earlier about the amount of evictions that we're seeing filed at the county level here in Los Angeles, that the biggest reason for that is rent owed. And that the average amount of rent owed is about $4,000. So eviction protection takeaways: that harassment and discrimination are defenses in eviction cases. That can be verbal, it could be through the phone, it could be written. One specific example right now, tying it into the Know Your Rights that we did earlier, is if a landlord texts you, right, like, you need to leave or I'm going to contact immigration, is that harassment? Is that discrimination? It's definitely a form of they're stating a reason that, was that on the list of at fault or at risk eviction, or at fault or no fault evictions, your legal status? Oh, yes. Yes, it is a form. That's not a valid reason for an eviction, right? Someone's legal status is not a valid reason to be able to evict them. And so it's important that a landlord must pay a tenant to move if their eviction is for no fault reason, and to seek legal help. At the highlight of this is that there is, and this is something, again, connecting it back to the presentation we did earlier on immigration, is knowing your rights is an important tool. There can absolutely be instances where your rights are violated, but knowing them helps you know what to make track of. And if something's just not sitting right with your spirit, where you're saying they said that they did the right thing, they said that what they're doing is legal, but I really don't think it is. I attended to Know Your Rights. I'm flagging that this is something that they said shouldn't be happening to me. Seek legal advice. And then this is a list of resources that we also have on the table, but I wanted to, Ricky, if you could jump to the other presentation. Our partners at Bethzetic, just want to do a really brief overview. They're a nonprofit civil legal services agency founded in 1974, and the next. So what they're doing in our partnership as part of their Preventing and Ending Homelessness project is they're assisting unhoused or immediately at-risk individuals, and the purpose of the program is to remove legal barriers to safe and stable housing. Next. So legal matters that they can support with are evictions, housing rights such as illegal housing application denials, illegal rent increases, habitability, public benefits denials such as social security income appeals, reasonable accommodation requests, preservation or reinstatement if you have lost a Section 8 voucher, traffic citations that prevent you from accessing housing, sealing eviction records to prevent you from being discriminated against, and to make it, because sometimes if you have an eviction on your record, it makes it more difficult to access housing. Demand letters, and sealing criminal records and doing criminal expungements to again reduce the barriers of people who are seeking low income or Section 8 housing. What they don't do is criminal law, family law, personal injury or property damage, most immigration, housing navigation support, so they won't help you look for housing, and then applications to public benefits. So they won't help you apply for CalFresh or SNAP, but if you are denied and you feel like it was an unfair denial, they can help you appeal it. And we ask for patience from folks that we refer. We have a legal clinic with them coming up in July with attorneys. So again, at our registration table or through contacting us, you can receive more information about that. And then, I know I'm trying to get through these, trying to get us out of here expeditiously. We also have partnered with National Council for Jewish Women for their housing stability program. So scroll down. So services that they provide, they ensure economic justice and equity for women. So they do services around housing stability, clothing assistance, cash for learning, workforce development, advocacy, and guaranteed income programs. You can keep going. You can keep going. And so this is the contact information for NCJW Los Angeles. Just in case folks want to take a picture of it. We also can provide referrals through our staff here today for people who need to access their services. And then scroll up, Ricky. Up to the orange one. Yeah. So they also have a housing navigator and a housing stability coordinator. This is important because although Beth Zedek is not supporting with housing navigation, our other partner, NCJW, is. So if you say, I do need assistance with an eviction, but I also need help even finding out where is the affordable housing, which one of them have openings, will they accept me? They can support with that. They also right now have rental assistance and a fund for women who are heads of households who need help with rental assistance, and for women who are heads of households who have not been able to work due to the immigration activity. They're also providing economic assistance for those women. Woo, and that is it. I am done. Please visit our resource table. And then if you are interested in a referral to either Beth Zedek or the National Council of Jewish Women, please sign up with us so that we can get you on that list and you can access some of their services.
Great job. Excellent job. Let's give Olympia another big hand. We're thankful, and before we conclude, we want to thank all of our community partners. We want to thank Gethsemane Christian Love Missionary Baptist Church and all the leaders, Community Coalition, the Empowerment Congress, Safer Streets, and we want to make sure that if you have not signed in, please do so. And we do have lunch. If you go over to the fellowship hall, we do have lunch over at the fellowship hall. So we're going to go ahead and conclude with prayer. We thank God for the civil rights attorneys. Let's give them a hand. We thank him for a rebuild of all of LA. Let us go ahead and pray, and we thank Raising Cane's. Let's give Raising Cane's a hand. We thank all of you and all of our partners. Let us pray. Dear gracious eternal Father, we thank you so much for this gathering. We thank you for Gethsemane Christian Love Missionary Baptist Church and its memberships. We thank you for Community Coalition. We thank you for the Empowerment Congress, and we thank you for Safer Streets. We thank you for rebuild of all of LA and all of the community partners who have come out, all of the clergy and ministers, and we pray now, God, your blessings to be upon us. And we pray, Lord, that you'll bless the food that we're about to receive. We pray, God, that you'll bless it, that it would take out all impurities, and as we eat it, you give us strength, that our bodies will be nourished to continue to do your most perfect will. In Christ's name we pray, amen. Yes. Also, so please stop by and get some food. Also, we have booklets for the constitutions. We want to make sure that all of you have the booklet for the constitutions of the United States of America. So please, just take one at a time. And we want to make sure that we also have registration for... we also want you to encourage to take the file of life information, the emergency contact, and please go to the Community Coalition registration table to get more products. But we want to make sure that you go next door where we can get all the food and we can fellowship, change, and exchange all the information. So let us please move next door as our praise team is getting ready to move in for their practice. So let's move quickly next door. Make sure you stop by the registration table. God bless each and every one of you. You want to go next door with us? Yeah. You want to go next door? Some wonderful food next door. Referral. If you need a referral, please come to the registration table and see Olympia. If you need referral letters, please come to the registration table. And Olympia, you can